Today we're going to talk more about Vim and Tmux. I have a new guest on today. Why don't you introduce yourself? Just tell us where you're from and what you do.
Yeah. So, hey everyone, I'm Abhishek. I'm from India and currently I work for a software services company called Incubite. My day job is mostly doing Ruby on Rails on the back end and React and Next sometimes on the front end. But other than that, I spend most of my time on GitHub, probably tweaking my dot files. So, yeah, that's pretty much about me. And I like messing around with my configs and also trying out new frameworks. So, yeah,
I love
that's
that.
me.
Yeah. I clocked 20 hours last, like in December, messing with Lazy Vim and like all
Yeah,
these new things coming in the Vim world. So I could definitely relate to you in just constantly tweaking, right? Constantly making updates.
it's hard to stop once you get started. So,
I tell people it's like a hobby, right? It's like this is just a hobby. If you don't
yeah,
want to sink your time into something like this, like just pick VS Code or WebStorm or just like reach for one of those really popular tools and it's going to get the job done. But
yeah,
the fun about doing things like Tmux and NeoVim, and I know there's some new tools out there now that we could talk about too today, but it's just about building a system that you like and
I had a nice term that would nicely summarize like the things that NeoVim or Tmux hobbies do. I think TJ mentioned about it in one of his videos. He called it personalized development environment. So not just a IDE, but a PDE. So yeah, I totally relate to that. And having the control to change things like till like your key bindings, right? You can change your key bindings. You can change the way your things your editor looks. So yeah, that just feels good to have everything your way and be able to replicate it wherever you want. So yeah,
that's right.
that's the main
Yeah.
purpose.
I love PDE. Like that concept hit
Yeah.
home for me when I heard him describe it.
Yep.
And I realized some people don't really care. I use a lot of car analogies where some people just buy the first car they see, they drive it off the lot, and they don't care. They just have no sense or interest in anything about their car other than they need to get from where they are to where they need to be. And then I also have a sports car, so I like customizing my car and doing things to it to make it different from other people. And so, to the same extent, there's like a certain personality type that enjoys this kind of world of configuration. And that's been true for me probably since I was a kid. There's all sorts of hobbies I picked up that was like, let me dig deep into the topic and learn everything there is to know about that thing. I think, though, the last conversation I had about this stuff, I realized that there are often values or there are things about your own environment that are important to you. Like for me, it's about being very minimalist. So I don't want very much clutter in my setup. And I also am very like hyper efficient with my keyboards shortcuts. So I have like lots and lots of keyboard shortcuts that sort of build on top of each other. So for me, like efficiency and a very clean and simple like interface are two values for me. I'm curious what things are important to you when you do these configurations and build your own setup as we go into this.
So for me, I would say definitely agree on the key bindings being as efficient as possible. That I think would be a very common thread among all NeoVim or Vim users. But on the other side, maybe I'm not as much of a minimalist because I like to have a colorful terminal and I like having integrations, I would say, is the most important thing for me. So I like building around tiny little scripts and maybe using tools like the GitHub CLI or let's say the Heroku CLI and just try and combine them with existing tools to create a nice workflow. So I would say, yeah, integrations and efficiency would be my thing.
Yeah, integrations. I love that. So, do you want to share your setup with us? Give us a little tour
Yeah,
of your PDE.
yeah, definitely. Let me share my screen. Let me select the right one. Okay, and I'm gonna move the browser window out of here.
There you go.
Let me
Zoom in a
increase the
little.
font
Yeah, that's
size. Yep,
perfect. Yeah, I can see it now.
awesome. My configs are actually broken down into multiple repositories. So I have my main .files repository over here. So that basically consists of all of my like normal stuff, like ZSHRC and git config and everything, right? So this, and I basically use git submodules to create the nested structure. And if I go in deeper, if you see, I'm currently using the awesome window manager and I'm currently on a pop OS system. I
Right.
recently started using a Mac as well, but I still I tried Yabai, I think window manager that
Yeah.
comes with Mac. I liked it, but I was still missing the like the full experience of a tiling window manager. But yeah, I definitely see myself, if I'm restricted to using a Mac, I would definitely do that. But yeah, I'm more on the like raw awesome window manager or i3 or something like that. So yeah, if you see here, I have all of my other configs. So awesome window manager configs live here, neovim lives here, and these are actually their own separate repositories. So
Okay.
I only do that for things that I spend a lot of my time on, like awesome window manager and neovim. These are separate repositories, but the other stuff that you see is integrated into the files repo, and then maybe another one that I use is for Rofi, the launcher that I use.
Oh,
So
yeah,
this little
nice.
launcher, yeah, that's a quick overview. And let me jump to my new Vim.
So let me
Yeah,
ask a question. What was like your
yeah.
mindset to separate your dot files into different repos?
So
Like
the
your
reason,
Git history, I'm guessing.
yeah, not just Git history, but actually I wanted to do a little mix and match. So I also have to work with Windows. Sometimes I have to work on Linux. Sometimes I have to work on a Mac, or even sometimes I work off of my Android tablet, right? Say I just pull my new Vim configs in there, set it up quickly. I don't need to worry about all of my other configs. Let's say if something is broken or some package is not available on, let's say, the Termux Android repository, right? There I can just utilize my editor. And let's say I do not want my awesome window manager on a Windows system or a Mac system. So there I could just use the default window manager that is provided or have my
Right.
own configs. And I actually maintain multiple versions, you can say, of my files repository. So I have, this is the main files repo, and then let me move this real quick. So I actually have, so this is files, this is the main repository. Then I have Win files, this is just
Oh,
for
nice.
Windows.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I'm recently started working on Mac files, which is still private, but yeah,
Yeah.
I'm planning to release that soon. And then this is my Android setup for Termux. So these are not actually full-fledged repositories. They actually use my files behind the scenes.
Yeah.
They have the files added in as a submodule, but then I have some scripts that basically configure it according to that environment. And yeah, it's always changing for me.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask a tough question.
Yeah,
Do you have to use multiple operating systems or is this by choice?
it's just by choice. I
Okay.
like exploring. So
So you like
Linux is my
exploring.
home.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
that's a good point. So you are interested in, you find it interesting to see how the different systems operate, huh?
yeah.
Yeah,
So Linux is always my slash home. I like always fall back into this, but I want the command line experience available everywhere. So
right.
even some of my Linode containers have the dot file setup. So yeah, I just like having the same experience everywhere, and
Right.
I just keep things ready if I have to work on some other OS for some time.
So I am team Mac OS probably for life. I've tried Linux. I definitely have a Windows machine for gaming and stuff like that. But there's, I guess, this keyboard layout, they call it
Yeah.
Darwin style. And so there's a command key on your thumb,
Yep.
and that command key drives all your keyboard shortcuts. Uh, I took it even further, and I have a whole video on this, but I have all of my terminal like environment driven by the command key as well. So I hit Command T, it creates a new Tmux window. I hit Command W, it closes the Tmux window. So like everything in Tmux is also driven by the Darwin style keyboard. So all that to say, I become so unproductive when I have to start
Yeah.
using my pinky to reach for the control key and do everything in a different keyboard shortcut. So I'm
Yep.
curious, have you run into that, or are you just, you're always control key, huh?
Yeah, I when I started using the Mac, initially I felt the same problem. Like I was pretty much used to my Alt and Super and Control keys,
Yeah.
but then using Command and Option and everything. So initially I tried doing a lot of back and forth, but then I just hard coded everything to with SKHD. I just defaulted to Control Alt and Super
Nice.
even on my Mac. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I do
That makes sense.
use some functionality, but it works out like the productivity boost. I definitely understand trying to change between things. So, yeah.
Cool. So I see your Z shell. Can you talk about all these colors? It looks like you
Yes.
put quite a lot in your Tmux config, like your
Yeah.
network
So,
connection, your battery, your RAM usage.
yeah.
I'm guessing, what is that percentage? CPU usage maybe, or storage?
Oh, yeah. This is CPU. This is my RAM, and this is the Git status.
That status.
These are the windows, and this is something that I was actually playing around with one of your recent Tmux plugins. I think you released a one for adding nerd
Yeah,
symbols
yeah.
instead of names. I actually like that idea a lot. I probably will create a folk just icons. Maybe not the best for me because I have lots of NeoVim term editors open at the same time.
Right.
So I'm trying to think of a directory based NeoVim like that will have the icon and the folder name as well. So yeah, I you
Cool.
might see a fork soon on that. And yeah, so this is a theme that I actually created based on the Tmux Dracula theme. I just named it Tmux 2K, and I think I have it public here
And
as
you're,
well.
yeah, this is cool.
This is the
No, and
theme.
all the colors are fun, and
Yeah,
it kind of, yeah, it's inviting, but it still seems pretty clean. I think my main question, I know we zoomed in a bunch, so you do
yeah,
have plenty of white space, huh? Once you zoom out and you're kind of in your day
yep,
to day. Yeah.
yep.
So I
And
was about to say,
also,
you'll run out of space here in two or three more windows.
yep, yep. My
But yeah,
main inspiration for this was actually my ZSH theme that I use. So if you see, a lot of the colors actually match here. So I just wanted to have the standard colors. So if you see the Git, the folder structure or the Git
yeah,
colors actually match up. So I just tried having the same color everywhere.
that's cool.
And yeah, I'm particularly fond of this blue color. I have it marked as my favorite in my color palette. It's 1688F0. I don't know how cool or how usual it is to have a like a preferred color shade, but
I
my
love that.
go-to is
Yeah.
this.
You
and
got the hex
pure
code
black.
memorized. I mean, look at
Yeah,
you.
yeah. That's my go-to colors. I even
Well,
have it like
let's zoom
everywhere.
out just a little bit. Let's like see this a little bit more balanced because I know it's a bit hairy right
So
now.
this
Okay,
is
cool. Yeah,
this is
yeah.
what it usually looks like for me.
Sweet. So, what is all this information giving you? Is it peace of mind? Are you like hyper
So
aware of your battery life? Because now it's listed twice, right? It's at the
yeah,
bottom and it's in the
yeah.
status bar.
So battery. So a lot of times try. Sometimes I try around Fizz or Bass, or let's say when I'm on Windows, I use PowerShell even. So there sometimes I do not have this in place. So
Right.
that time I can easily fall back on the
Oh
Tmux
yeah.
version.
Okay.
And the version stuff I actually, so I mostly work with Ruby, and I have some side projects that I do on GitHub, and then I have my main day jobs. I just try and be mindful of which version I'm using, because a lot of my NeoVim configs even depend on my current Ruby versions. Let's say if I don't have a particular gem like Solar Graph, which is the LSP for Ruby, installed correctly, then I'll start seeing a bunch of errors on my NeoVim, and then I have a bunch of settings configured as well. Yeah, and all this is managed by ASDF, which is a version manager. And then, yeah, I use Vim key bindings on my cell as well sometimes.
Yeah.
So
I love
this
that.
is
That's one of
this
my
is
favorite
for,
features. Yeah.
yeah. And then
Very
yeah, this
cool.
is the standard stuff, and I always have this spaceship icon everywhere. So even on my
Yeah, I saw
uh,
that.
Tmux, you can say it. So it's just a personal preference.
And
That
can you talk about like session management? How do you build and
so
create sessions in Tmux and what's your like methodology there?
So I use Tmux Resurrect, and I
Yep.
think I had one more plugin along with it. I forgot the name. Yeah, it's Tmux Continuum and Tmux Resurrect. That is basically my go-to config. So like even when I just forget to close the session, or let's say I'm working on something and for some reason I exited out of it, Tmux Continuum will actually save the session in every 15 minutes. So when I'm back, I can just step right into
Oh, cool.
whatever I was doing. Yeah, it's really handy.
So a session is like a project, like a Git project?
So
Is
for
it one to
me,
one? Yeah, yeah. Just talk about that for a while.
yeah,
I'm curious.
for me, a session is actually a feature, I would say.
Okay.
Currently, whatever I'm working on. So I try and keep my Tmux session separate. Let's say I'm working on a backend feature, I'll use a particular Tmux session named after that feature. And let's say if I have to do some deployment related thing or some circle ci related changes, I might create another session for that,
Yeah.
and I can easily switch between them like with just Tmux a and the session name. So that's something that I tend to use a lot. And then also something that has really come in handy is Git work trees. So even when I'm working on the same branch, if I'm working on, sorry, even if on the same repository, if I'm working on multiple features, Git work trees help a lot. And combine that with Tmux, it's just really efficient for me. I'm just used to it now.
Yeah. So I had a previous conversation about workflows. Are you talking about work trees?
Yeah, Git work trees. Yeah,
Yeah, get work trees. Yeah, everybody keeps talking about it. I'm excited to give it a go here soon. I have a project that I'm going to start from scratch here in the next month or so. And yeah, I love this idea of you can have multiple branches checked out at the same time. So you can, I don't like multitasking much when I'm programming. Like I want to be focused.
true.
So I got good at stashing, but I recognize, especially with dependencies, like sometimes
Yeah.
switching
It,
branches isn't just okay, you're done. You just switch your branch and everything's good. It's sometimes not. Interesting. So Where does your session name live? Is it visible here, or do you just have a special session opened right now?
So this is the current session that I opened up, but let's say if I went to a new one, I don't think I have any saved. So I also use Kitty, and Kitty has its
Oh
own
yeah,
tab management. So sometimes I rely on this, and it also has some useful key bindings. So it's actually another layer over Tmux if
cool.
you really want it. But yeah, usually for me, what it looks like is I have the key bindings added. So let's say if there were any other active sessions, I would just see them here
Mm,
and I could directly jump into them. And this is this nice preview thing. I'm doing this with FZF, and FZF has a nice preview command that you can use. And this is like, this was a game changer for me because if I wanted to edit some file, right? Let's say I went to my dot files and I have this binding added to control F. So if I type VI and control F, and let's say I wanted to edit my setup script, can just directly jump into that.
cool.
So it is like a telescope for your ZSH.
So
So
sometimes so to my understanding, sometimes you use kitties like tabs to kind
yeah,
of get to somewhere else just for fun. Have a couple TMUX sessions open. I want to see what it feels like
yeah.
for you to have more than one TMUX session, and maybe you're switching between them at the same time.
Let me. Okay. So let's say this is one of them, right? And so I just do Control AS, and then I just directly switch between them. And let's say if I'm on a different terminal, right, I would just rename the session to something fun or something that matches the current context. Let's say if I'm on another one and then I open another session,
Right.
and let's say I name this debug or something, right? And then I, let's say, wanted to jump into my editor, or let's say my setup. So yeah, this is how I usually
Okay.
switch between. It's a
So
control
you
AS.
don't care much about the session name. You just
Yeah.
spin things up on the fly, and then
Yep.
I think there's another view that lets you see all of the panes on all of
Yeah, I
your
think
windows as well. So that one
that's
might be even more
mapped to,
helpful
yeah,
to you. Oh yeah,
control
that one.
AW. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I use this as well, but most of the times I try and limit my Tmux like panes to Tmux windows to 3 or 4 at max because it's
sure.
easier to reach with Alt. And I am also using another Tmux plugin called Tilet, which I created. It was a fork of another Tmux plugin, but it basically gives you a bunch of tiling window manager capabilities in Tmux. I think I
Right.
have that over here. Yeah, this one. So this lets me add a bunch of alt key bindings. I think I had them documented. Yeah. So these are the key bindings that are provided, and like it helps me add splits and everything like super fast, move between them quickly. And this another nice thing about this is that I have, let's say I had a split in NeoVim, right? And I wanted to use the same key bindings, so I can do that. And
Yeah, I love
this
that.
was a game changer for me to be easily be able to switch between NeoVim and Tmux splits because yeah, sometimes I'm running my REPL on Tmux and my editor is open. So yeah, in situations like those, it really helps.
No, this is great. I've been meaning to. Oh, okay. So this is driven by the Alt key,
Yeah.
and I use something that just lets me switch between panes with the Control HJKL, and that's all that the plugin does. But this one does that and a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, it will let you create, rename, detach, save everything like,
I love
and
this. Yeah, yeah.
it's very easily customizable as well.
Okay. No, this is great.
And I also tried playing around with how Yabai, or let's say Awesome or some other window manager, have the dynamic tiling support. So this also has that. So let's say if you created 10 windows, right? They will be like 10 panes in your same window. They will be dynamically tiled. So you won't just see 10 vertical spreads or
Yeah.
10 horizontal spreads. So yeah, that is something. It's a little buggy right now, but yeah, it works.
No, that's great. That's very cool. All right. Interesting. We do things very differently. It's so funny that we talk about personalized developer environments, and my setup is very different than yours, I would say. Maybe aside from just the fact that
We use the
we
same
both
tools,
use
but
Tmux and Vim. Let's spend a little bit more minute. I don't want to just switch back to my setup, and I'll explain more of what I do in comparison. But how about you talk a little bit about your NeoVim and maybe just point out plugins
yeah,
or tools or things that you really like right now about your NeoVim setup?
yeah. I actually also posted. So I have recently started documenting all of this just for myself.
Yeah.
I document this and I try and post them on YouTube. So yeah, it's not anything fancy. It's just a screen share of me very slowly talking through my NeoVim configs or my dot file. So
Cool.
yeah, if anyone wants to go in depth, that would be the place. But right now, let me show you my go-to place. So let's start with the plugin list, right? Let me zoom in a bit.
And I'm
Okay.
guessing you use Packer.
No, I have switched to lazy. I
Okay.
think so. I switched to lazy right after it was created. So
Yeah.
I was actually looking, I was trying a lot of things to get my plugins lazy loaded before lazy was out. And as soon as I saw it on my GitHub explore thread, I immediately switched to it. And yeah, I was earlier actually using, so when I started moving from Vim to NeoVim, I was just using my Vim RC in NeoVim. So that have continued for almost 6 months, I would say. But then I was feeling that my Vim configs are actually holding me back, and I had to do a lot of
Yeah.
if new Vim in my configs. So after that, I just and then Vim script 9 came out, which basically triggered me to switch to an entire Lua based config.
Yeah.
And yeah, after that, it's just been Lua, and I'm really happy with the way things turned out. And I have my configs like I like the structure.
I think
It's
we've all been
very
there with the
yeah,
Vim to Lua.
yeah, yeah,
Like we've all had to make that. Most of us have transitioned at this point.
yep.
Cool. But you're not
Okay,
using lazy Vim. He has like a pre-configured dot file, like a distro.
right.
You're just using the package manager on its
Yeah, I'm just
own
using the
with your
package
own
manager.
plugins.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, with my own
Yeah,
set
yeah.
of plugins
That
and
makes sense.
customizations. I'm not really a fan of like pre-configured editors. Yeah, they are good if you are starting off. I would say they are the best place to start. You don't need to mess around with a lot of things, but that kind of defeats the purpose for me to be able to customize everything exactly how I want, and I have
Sure.
to read the current configs and then configure them. But if you're going with default, it's much easier to configure.
I think it's a lot more work to I think it's a lot more work to do it yourself, but you get the benefit of everything about the config.
Yeah,
Every single
yeah,
line of code you are
yeah,
aware of, and every piece of configuration is something you've chosen versus
yeah.
something chosen for you. So I totally get that.
Even if there's like a single line of error or a warning message, you would know exactly where that's coming
Right.
from. Uh, in terms
So
of plugins,
just tell me,
yeah,
yeah, like instead of going through all of this, because that would take all day, right?
yeah, definitely.
What is like one or
My
two plugins or settings that like stand out to you recently that gave you a
Hmm.
boost in productivity or you just find interesting? Like just share a couple of pieces of this that you are excited about right now.
Yeah. So the first thing would be toggle term. Toggle term integrated with. So this is the default toggle term terminal.
Mhm.
But what is the most, what has been the most productive for me is toggle term integrated with Lazygit. So I have this configuration added
Lazy
that
Git.
lets,
That's
yeah.
my favorite.
So I'm a big fan of this tool. It took my Git game to the next level actually, and it's so fun to use from inside NeoVim. So I can just open anything, and just with a quick key binding, I can do partial stash, I can do partial commits, and I have all of the features available. So this I would say is the biggest productivity booster for me. And
Nice.
then another one would be how I handle my notes with NeoVim. So earlier I actually I moved a lot with my note setup. So I have used Notion, I have used Obsidian, I have used raw markdown with Git, and where I finally settled on is raw markdown and Git plus NeoVim, and then this plugin called Telecastin. Yeah, this is the plugin that I use, and what it lets me do is I have this nice set of plugins configured, this key bindings configured with which key. And let's say if I wanted to create a to-do list or a daily note for today, I would just do this, and it would open the my current to-do list, right? And I would just, let's say, YouTube sync, let's say, for example, right?
Yeah.
And if I wanted to save this, right, and I mentioned that I move a lot between machines. So if I just do a ns, that basically I have a script in the background that whenever I hit this key binding, it actually commits this on my private Git repo of my notes, and it
Hmm.
pushes them up. And I
Very
don't
cool.
need to monitor that. It's just a standard backup message. And then whenever I switch to my other machine, I actually have a script running that basically knows that hey, these are the repositories that I need to sync every
Hmm.
time I do a first boot. So my dot files, NeoVim, my notes, they are actually synced on every first boot with Git. So yeah,
Oh,
I would say
sweet.
these
Yeah,
are the
yeah. So
two
your
things.
computer starts up and it does the sync.
Yeah,
Do you have to
yeah.
manually do that key binding to sync your notes or
So I
like
had
push them?
no. So if I normally for my save, I have leader ww. That's for my normal save. But
Yeah.
for syncing my notes, I actually have it mapped to N and S,
Okay.
leader
So
and S.
you're saving the note, but you're
Yeah,
using a binding that pushes it to yeah,
yeah,
to the Git. That's smart.
yeah.
That's cool, man. No, that makes sense.
So yeah, these two, and then I would say maybe telescope comes in super handy as
Yeah.
always.
Telescope's
Uh,
amazing.
yeah, and I'm also trying to get into the NVIM DApp, the debug
Right.
adapter protocol, but it doesn't really come in that useful because with Ruby I have the integrated cell, which is very easy to use in the first place. So yeah, something that if you really need it, it's there, but don't rely on that as much.
Got it. That makes
Yeah, I
sense.
would say these two are the things. And also, I think another one that I think I copied this from IntelliJ. So IntelliJ has this nice, and all of my colleagues most of my colleagues actually use IntelliJ or its VS Code. But what IntelliJ lets you do is it has a nice feature that, let's say, if I had a git commit message open, right? Let's say I went into this, and if I open it in a commit message basically in NeoVim,
Yep.
and I wanted to add a co-author, right? That's like a very particular format that you have to use to add co-authors. So I actually created this plugin that basically looks at all of the authors in your current repository, and it gives you a nice fuzzy searchable list. So yeah, this I would say is a lifesaver because I do a lot of pair programming over here at Incubite, and
Yeah,
every time asking people to send their email address or their Git username, it really like messes up the flow. So
it's not efficient.
yeah, yeah. So this is something
I
that
love
I
that. No, and so
created.
you do a lot of pair programming, huh? You spend a lot of
Yeah,
time
yeah,
working on problems together. Yeah.
yep, yep.
No, that's so cool. I remember you posting that plugin. Was it
Yeah,
fun? Was it fun building that? Did you enjoy the experience of trying to make a telescope plugin?
initially I tried to go with as bare bones as I could. I just wanted something that would give me the list of current Git authors, and that is actually being done by a simple Git, a simple Bash script.
Right.
But then I saw that I was already using NVim UI. I think it is a plugin. It is a wrapper around Vim select, Vim import, and all of the
Cool.
default Vim APIs. So I just utilized that, and that basically gave me the fuzzy searching capabilities out of the box. Yeah, and actually, the funny thing is, ChatGPT had just came out, and I actually used ChatGPT to help me write some of this plugin. It was a really
Nice.
bad code initially. It was a good starting point for me.
I love that. Yeah, I've used ChatGPT a few times to be like, "Hey, how do I do this weird thing I don't usually do with a programming language I don't usually touch?" And it's like, "Oh, here's the starting point," like you said.
Yeah,
No, I love
it's
that.
really good for starting off. But yeah, I would not recommend. Like I have seen some of my friends actually like totally relying on ChatGPT or Copilot for
Yeah.
writing code. I'm really scared if more people start doing
Yeah.
that, it would be bad.
I do generally recommend it as like an assistant. So if
Yeah,
you were pair programming and you
yeah,
had someone less
something like that.
experienced than you
Yep,
that had a dictionary out and knew how to
yeah,
look up stuff, like you don't
documentation.
know they're going to be good at looking it up and you don't know if what they're going to give you is completely solid advice, but it is less effort on your part if you just give them a
Yep,
prompt and it gives you something back.
that's a really nice analogy.
But I've told most beginner programmers like don't use Copilot at all because they
Yep,
don't know what's wrong. And if they spend time using that tool and then their code is buggy, they may not even know how to find the bug because they didn't write the code themselves. So it's definitely a warning that I've given many junior devs. But more intermediate and advanced people, go for it. It
yeah, just
does
use
the
it as a
boilerplate work, right,
yeah.
for you. So that's cool. Is there anything else you want to show off right now before we kind of swap places? And I'll give you a little bit of a tour of my setup.
I would say in other stuff like I have the Lua line and everything configured, but another good thing
Yeah.
I would say are these lines that you see, the virtual lines complaining about my LSP. If my
Yep.
LSP detects any errors, any warnings, I think I'm using something called LSP Lines over here. Yeah, this plugin. Yep, LSP Lines,
Oh,
and
cool.
this is
Yeah. Yeah.
something that really comes in handy. Let's say if I'm working on a large file, so it's hard to move between places. Like let's say the first error, the second error. So yeah, LSP Lines really makes it very visual. And yeah, other than that, which key is definitely a plus. I'm a big fan. I have like thousands of
Oh, nice.
keys
Yeah.
mapped here.
Which key is so nice?
Yeah. So I have sometimes I go 2, 3 levels. So for Git, I'm using a GitHub plugin recently. I started using this, and yeah, I would shout out to the author of this one as well because it is like it brings the entire GitHub workflow to NeoVim, and I think it's
Is that
just called
Octo?
no, I think it's called gh.nvim. I recently started using it,
Okay.
and I most of my workflow revolves around GitHub. I think like a lot of other devs as well, and like having a separate browser window just for replying on PRs or doing code reviews. I think and doing the context switching between NeoVim and the browser, that sometimes wastes a lot of time. Yeah,
Yeah.
this was a lifesaver if
I'll
I'm
have
working
to
on a
I'll have
PR.
to compare this to the one I'm using one called Octo, and it
Octo.
offers mostly the same features, but I'm
Okay.
sure it's implemented differently.
Hmm.
So I'll give that a look. Cool.
Octo and Vim. Oh,
Very
Octo
cool.
seems to be much more popular. Maybe I should try that out. It's nice.
Maybe. Yeah,
Yeah, I'll.
it works fairly well for me. I haven't gotten all the key bindings figured out yet, and it's not
Octo
super
has
intuitive,
PR
but
support as well.
yeah, yeah. So
Does
I
it?
can open up a PR, do a code review in NeoVim. I'm sure, especially if this ends up on YouTube, everyone's gonna be like, "Please make a video on that." So I think that's a weird edge case that a lot of NeoVimmers like haven't quite figured out. So it'd be interesting if you decide to make a video on that and share it a bit more in depth. But
Yeah, it. I'd try out Octo as well. Looks really nice. I'm looking at the repo. So
yeah,
yeah,
it's been pretty polished so far.
yeah,
Cool. So do you want to switch places? I'll give you some overviews on my stuff and kind of
yeah.
show you how they differ. So let's see. So I love the
Classic.
menuless, dockless, like transparent. This is the vibe, right?
Yeah,
this is how everything goes in my developer environment. And I have
and
this
it
script,
hits minimalist like on point. It's
right,
like super
minimalist to the
clean.
max. And then I
Yeah,
really enjoy the built-in Mac OS
the
wallpapers.
wallpapers.
You
Yeah,
know, there's all these cool ones. We could just pick one. Let's see, I got to do this. Right. And there's just so many of them that are fun to work with.
really like the dynamic one. So on my
Yeah,
Mac, I
exactly.
also use the transparent background. I actually use the same one on my Linux system as well, but my wallpaper is black, so it doesn't really matter.
And so,
But
yeah,
yeah,
these
Mac
dynamic
it really
ones
looks,
change depending on the time
yeah,
of day, which is
it
fun.
looks nice. Yeah.
And then I have a special smart script which I can
Okay.
link to and mention, but I have a Tmux like smart session manager
Oh
basically.
yeah, I looked at the repo, but I haven't able to
And
try it
so
out yet.
it combines a couple of tools. It combines Zoxide, which is like a
Okay. Yeah.
jump to
Z.
directory, like
Yeah.
a smart jump to directory, and then it uses Fuzzy Finder. And so the way that it works is you just run the T script and it
Okay.
lists all of the potential directories. And so we'll just dot files is the first one. You hit enter and it creates the session.
Oh,
And
it
so
creates a teamwork session for you.
it creates it on your behalf.
Nice.
Um, and so I have a little Git context, what branch I'm on, and then this little
This is
icon
the
is
new plugin.
my window. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
that new plugin that we mentioned earlier. And so I could have Vim opened and maybe the terminal open, and maybe I'm running a script or whatever. And again, very minimal. What I like about Tmux is the ability to have multiple sessions running and have an editor and a script. And to your point, usually it's maybe 2 or 3 windows and that's it. And once those things are up and running, I don't really need much clutter to know that they
Yeah.
exist. This is enough for me. And then the color identifies what's active. But what's cool is if I hit Command J, the T Smart plugin pops up as a pop up in Tmux.
Okay.
And so it lists all the active sessions at the first list, like at the beginning.
And then
So I could open up my website, I can open up my work project, I can open up the nerd font project, and within
and
2 or 3 keystrokes, I
these are
now
actually
have
creating separate sessions.
it creates a session per project.
Awesome. This is
So if
nice.
I have, and pretty much for me, uh, a Tmux session is a project. So
Right.
it can be in a mono repo. So I'm currently building this project called Energy Choice. So it's a product, it's a web app, and so it lives within a mono repo. So Nutility is my day job, and apps is a folder in a mono repo, and Energy Choice is the specific project. And I go beyond just a repo. Originally I just had a Git repo was a Tmux session, and I realize now that I want to contextualize, like, basically for me, if anything has a package JSON,
Okay.
I think of it as like a singular.
Project.
And I use this pop-up window to switch between sessions as well, because Fuzzy Finder will
Yeah.
prioritize what's first. So if I literally just hit the letter E, it picks energy choice. If I hit the letter J, it picks my
The
website.
website.
And so it's really fast. If you've
Yeah.
noticed, I'm only typing 2 or 3 characters at a
Yeah.
time, and I'm going to exactly where I want to go. And if I don't use the resurrect kind of command, so if I just kill these sessions just like that, like none of these sessions exists now, and it doesn't matter to me. So just as quickly, I can have pretty much everything
Everything.
up and running within 3 or 4 seconds.
Yeah. This is really handy.
And so,
Even the Control J key bindings are handled by the same script, or is this something
so,
else?
so when you install the plugin, it's bound to. That's a good question. It's bound to prefix capital T.
Okay.
I don't use prefix in my
Yeah.
setup. I always use a command-based key.
Direct.
And so the way that it works is I have Alacrity lets me set up hex code bindings
Right.
to the keyboard shortcuts. So for me, if we go to Command J, it's prefix capital T. And you see I have a little
Right.
comment here, open
Yeah.
TMX Smart Session Manager. So I have all of these keyboard shortcuts, and I have a whole video on this, how this works. But basically, you just set up a hex code, and then you use Alacrity to bind keys. So for me, like, I can hit Command S, and it saves. It's gonna blow up on me today, but it's gonna basically save the file that I have open in.
Right. You're
Uh,
actually using the same keys, but Alacrity handles them differently.
Alacrity's hearing Command T, and it's sending prefix in, and so it creates a new Tmux window. So it's a little bit clever, but browsers, Finder, my every Mac OS app that I have all use the same key bindings, right?
Yeah.
Command T
Yeah.
opens a new tab, Command W closes a window. I have Command P, which is really popular in the VS Code world. Command
Yep.
P finds files. Command Shift P runs a command, and so I have telescope commands bound to that, which lets me have like autocomplete for Vim commands. And so I'm just using command-driven keyboard shortcuts to do everything that I would do in any other Mac OS app. So it feels very seamless. Everything all
Yeah.
feels the same, acts the same, keyboard shortcuts are the same. And combined with this script, and it's funny, you mentioned you hit VI and then you do something else. You hit like Control F or something.
Yeah.
So I use the fish
Okay.
shell. So I use fish, friendly interactive shell, and it has a concept called abbreviations. And so you
Okay.
can hit a letter. Let's see, what would be a good one? GST would be get status. And what it does is it actually expands out the command versus an alias that just obfuscates
Oh,
the
yeah. I
command.
think, yeah, I think I'm also using something similar. I think ZSH has the expand alias plugin. So
Oh,
let's say
nice. So there's a
if
plugin for
I,
it. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
If
So,
I used git reset hard head or something, that is
right.
something that I very commonly use. So even if I type grhh and I hit a space, it will actually expand it. So
Nice.
I know what command is running. So yeah, this
Exactly. I
is,
love that. And I
yeah,
used ZSH for years, but I found that when I added these plugins that I wanted and liked, it slowed ZSH down.
yeah, it
And
is,
all of
it
these
does
features I've
slow.
mentioned are all built into Fish. They're first
Yeah, they're,
party features. And so for me, when I hit V and hit enter, it automatically opens Vim, and then it opens the find files.
Telescope.
Yeah, and if I zoom out a little, I get the preview with telescope. And even what's even more interesting is if I hit Command P, I can be in the terminal. If I hit Command P, it also opens up Vim and opens up the files. So for those that
This is
know
useful.
Command P,
Yeah.
it's a little bit of magic, but basically Vim, I have a go-to file command that's custom, and then
And
combine
is
that
this
with.
configured in your Alacrity configs?
So
The
what
command
happens
P?
here is if we type Command P, all that Command P
Okay.
does is it types
Go
colon
to
go to
file and
file
enter.
enter. And so when you're in Vim, it opens up the file picker. And if you're in the terminal, I have a abbreviation that basically swaps this out for in Vim plus go to file,
Oh,
which are doing the
that's
same thing but in
yeah,
different contexts.
that's
So
useful.
so it's clever. It's very
Yeah.
clever, but it makes it so that if I just want to open up a file, I just hit Command P, and anywhere I am, it works. And the same with so my Lazygit. And so I really love Lazygit as well. I can do the whole pop-up thing, which I don't usually do. I have Command G bound to create a new
Lazygit
session, a
session.
new window in Tmux.
Yeah.
So it's contextual. If I'm in
Dot
command
files, it will
prompt, like
open
in the
that
shell
repo.
environment,
Yeah.
if I'm in Vim, if there's a script running, like anywhere that I'm at in Tmux at any time, and this command is contextual to the session I'm in. So when I'm in the .files repo uh, and I hit Command G, it opens up Lazygit in a new tab. And once I'm done doing everything, right, I can even do what you were mentioning here. I can create a Tmux. I can create a custom prompt and I can do all my work. And when I'm done, I just hit Q and it takes me back to whatever window I was at before.
So what is Q map to
Q
in
is
this
built into Lazygit. So Lazygit Q is a quick
quit?
command. Yeah.
So how do you does it also kill the Lazygit pane and take you back, or it
It
just switches
kills,
back?
so it's its own
Okay.
window, and then the window gets closed when I hit Q.
Okay. Hmm.
And that one's also pretty simple to do. That one is, where's that defined? Tmux conf. So this one is just like this: bind G to new window, and then this -in flag lets me name it, and then lazygit is the command.
Lazygit.
And so when this command runs, it does its thing, and then when lazygit is killed as a process, it auto kills the
The
window.
window.
Yeah. So you just kind of hit Command G, do your thing, and then hit Q, and you're back to whatever you were doing.
So from what I understand, like for you, no matter where you are in, like on your cell or on your editor or anywhere, you can actually use the same key bindings to do the same things.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is
And
universal to the
yeah,
whole developer environment. Yeah.
and for me, it's I have a separate set of things that I do when I'm, let's say, on Z cell, but for the same things, I actually have a separate set of keys when I'm in NeoVim, like simple as
Yep.
finding files. I do Control F on my cell, but on NeoVim I do leader FF. So yeah, I don't know,
And
like
I have
I'm
lots
right.
of leader keys. Yeah, I use which key as well. There are so many leader keys that
Yeah,
I could talk about today. But in general, like Git is just a universal thing. It's
yeah,
something I always want to reach for no matter what I'm doing in the terminal environment.
yeah.
So
I think
that's
Git and
kind of,
find
yeah.
files, that really is like handy. And I know Kitty also provides adding hex codes to key bindings.
Oh,
So
nice.
adding, so yeah, I might try that as well. I think it would be really useful to just have Control G everywhere for Git.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
yeah.
try that definitely.
And so I know we're coming up to the end of the time here. So we want, what do I want to open up? Like it's,
I didn't even feel like it. It's been an hour.
Time flies. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll talk a little bit about my setups. I use LF, which is a file manager. I don't like the sidebar, like the file
Okay.
sidebar thing. I'm just like not a fan of that. Something I was going to mention to you is with Lazy, you can put all of your files in Lua plugins, and everything that you define in plugins is auto loaded by
Picked up.
Lazy.
Yeah.
So you don't have to have a file that defines all your plugins like traditionally. You can just create files that drive those things. And so here I have all of the plugins,
Your plugins.
and I'm choosing to. I do at this point use Lazy Vim, the distro, the like
Right.
pre-configured distro he's invented. I'm using that right now, and then I've customized on top of it. So like I've removed a lot of the icons, like there's X's in this buffer line that I got rid
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
and then the get signs I overwrite with the using nerd font icons, because you'll see here I have a little plus here that matches the plus up at the top,
On
and
the
so
yeah.
I
I
work
noticed
very
that
hard to be consistent across
your
the
your
board.
your Lazygit also uses the same.
I have these nerd
Yeah.
font
Yeah.
icons. Yeah,
Same
so I
thing.
forked Lazy Vim to get this. It wasn't merged yet, but maybe one day we'll get this merged.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's what I'm doing there. One
For
thing I really like
loading.
is
Yeah.
I can use brackets. So I don't know
Okay.
if it's a common thing, but usually people do like angle bracket and then G. For me, it's angle bracket G will let me jump to places that have a Git diff. Like we call them hunks in Git. So that's cool that I
Yeah.
can
So it. I
like,
actually use Git signs. Yeah. I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that
So
also
it's built
provides.
in. Hmm. So it looks a little bit like this in normal mode.
Yeah.
If I
Yeah.
hit angle bracket G, I can go to next hunk.
Yep. Yep.
Super
I
helpful.
I
I
have
can
it added
stage hunks too.
into GG basically GG and GK basically next hunk previous hunk and
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
very similar to your setup.
And then I have a whole bunch of other Git based things like staging a buffer, resetting a
Nice.
whole buffer. I need to, these are in conflict right now, this one. So I can like stage hunks while I'm in Vim,
Yeah.
which is pretty
And
cool.
commit them from Lazygit.
So I can be like here and I can be like, okay, cool. I want to add this space GG, space GG, right? Space GG, and like this very quickly. And then I hit Command GC and it immediately pulls up this buffer. I can just hit
One thing I would
C,
like to
right?
know is
Yeah, go
how
ahead.
did you can you open your which key once? The which key overlay? Yeah. How did you get this to be transparent? Did you add anything to your color scheme key bindings? Because I've got my background transparent, but I can't actually get which key to be
Yeah, good
transparent.
question. So I use Catppuccin for my color theme.
Okay.
And the Capuchin team, the contributors to this project, they went out of their way to get this transparent background feature. And
Oh,
they have integration with a lot of plugins. Witch
okay.
Key being one of them, Harpoon. We didn't talk much about Harpoon today, but
Yeah.
Harpoon
Bookmarks.
is
Yeah.
transparent as well,
Yeah.
right? So Harpoon is transparent and Telescope is transparent. And all of that is because the Capuchin team worked really hard at getting that to work.
I
I
need to look
also
at
have
their code once.
this transparent.envim.
Oh,
And so this is another one that
let
adds a
me.
little bit more support for transparency because it's hard to
Yep.
get right. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
I've
I
even tried
understand.
other themes and it's like they don't all support the transparency correctly. So I'm just on this one for now. The other thing I wanted to show off, which I think you'd really like, is let's
Yeah.
see. Yeah, Lua, config Lua. Trying to find a good example. Okay, I guess I'll just have one open for now. show this one off. So in our config files, actually, I'll just go to my tmux conf. This is a very familiar format. You probably
Yep.
immediately recognize it. It's a Git repository. It's a
Yeah.
username / project name. So if I hit Command O, I get this pop-up that gives me
You are.
GitHub URLs based off of that string. And so I can just choose it and it will open up those repos for me.
You using Tmux URL for this?
So I'm using fuzzy URL. And at this
Okay.
point, it's a fork. So I added the
Okay.
GitHub support, and we've merged some of the code in, but it's not quite perfect on the original project. But this one is working consistently for me now. Yeah, and it also opens up URLs. So if we just like here, we have github.com/tmux, and that one
It
can
will
be
pick it
opened
up.
as well.
Nice.
Although my browser is being slow today, which is interesting. There you go. Now it opens. But yeah, so that's a cool feature that I've enjoyed.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna try a few things. The Tmux and maybe try out Octo as well. And definitely play around with transparency a bit more. That will be my time for tomorrow, I guess. I'm gonna play around with them.
Yeah, and I want to definitely look into some of the things you brought up today. I looked at Telecastin before, but I think the LSP Lines is one that I really want like today. I'll probably get off this call and go install it
Yeah,
because
it's super quick to
it
set up
just
as well.
I never can see what's
Yeah,
being said in the LSP like
yep.
diagnostic lines. Like they're not ever there's never enough space to understand them.
I think one
Um,
more thing you'd like is notifications, notify.nvim. So
yeah,
I
I
think
have
you
that
have
one
already set
installed.
up.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
super
yeah. I
helpful.
really
Super
like that.
super helpful. Cool. This has been really fun. Uh, is there any final thoughts you want to share before we call it a day here?
I would say it's really crazy how quickly the hour went. So yeah, maybe we can do this again later, and I'll keep you updated on GitHub or on Twitter. And it would be definitely fun to catch up and see the
Yeah.
progress that you are making on your dot files. And
Yeah,
maybe I
let's
can
stay in
copy
touch for
something
sure.
from there.
You got a YouTube subscription from me if I'm not already subscribed.
Yeah,
It was really fun conversation. I'm going to link to all of this. So I'll put all this together. There'll be a blog post, there'll be a YouTube video about all this. And so if people
awesome.
want to see what we talked about today, they can go find the links directly. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on. I had a good time.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me.